Today is March 13th, 2017, and this is the beginning of an interview with Joseph Hilchey at the Ocala Public Library in Marion County. My name is Sam Prokosky, and I'll be the interviewer. Could you please tell us your full name and address?
Joseph H. Hilchey. I live at 9 Ocala, Florida, on top of the world.
Where were you born?
Brockton, Massachusetts.
How old are you today?
How old am I today? 75.
Who are your parents and what did they do?
My parents, they want the names. My mother's name is Mary Catherine Litaz Hilchey. She was, my mother's mostly Polish, some Lithuanian, Ukrainian, and Russian. My father's, his name was Ralph Frederick Hilchey. He was first generation from Canada, and he was Scotch, Irish, German, Swiss, Canadian.
Do you have any siblings?
I had two sisters and two brothers. I have one sister died about 10 years ago from a medical treatment she was taking. A kidney shut down and killed her. So, and then my other brother just passed away about a year and a half from cancer.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Before I entered the service, I went to I went to parochial school, and then I went to trade school, which is by the Salesian order. It was an Italian order, so I learned cabinet making, and I had some exposure to building, house building, and working in the shop, doing mill work and stuff like that. And I went to a year of college for architectural engineering, but when I got into calculus, that was that was the clincher. But I finished a year. I said I'd finish the year, and I did. And at that time, we had a draft, so I wanted to beat the draft. I didn't want to get drafted in the Army, so actually I signed up for Marine Corps and ended up going to the Navy, getting recruited in the Navy submarines. So that's where I spent most of my time.
When did you enter the service?
1963.
Why did you choose this specific branch? Why did you choose the Marines and then end up in the Navy?
I just wanted to get out of town. But I had a couple buddies of mine, we all joined at the same time. They, when they heard that I was about to, to pack up, I had gone for all my tests, all my medical and everything, so I was ready to rock and roll. But they all just went into the Navy Fargo building in Boston, and then next thing you know, we're in the submarine reserve unit, and then from there I went to different schools, submarine school, and then got put on active duty and went to another school with the Navy and out to the West Coast where I wanted to go.
Where did you serve?
Where? Most of my time was on the West Coast. I volunteered for duty off of Vietnam at the time. We went out and photo reconnaissance off shipping in the northern shipping channels. So we pulled the plug and went down for 55 days in an old diesel sub. So it was hot, sticky, and you ate your way through the mess decks. All your food was come in boxes and cans, which you didn't have in the refrigerator, and you had to work your way through it. And all your bigger cans, 5-gallon cans, come in a square can. They were stored outside the engines, and invariably the enginemen were walking on it, servicing the diesels, and fuel would get in there and oil. So when you made coffee, you skimmed the oil off the top. Well, that was life. We were running the engines when we used to sneak out at night. International waters, it would be 100 degrees in the engine room. In the forward engine room, we had still making water, and it was 120 degrees in there. So you had to make battery water, otherwise you were dead in the water. So, and you made some drinking water, and you only got one shower a week, and that was it. You wanted to take a saltwater shower down on the lower flats, you could, but you'd probably be itching all week. But the nuclear submarines are different. They get endless supply of water and fresh air. They can make their own atmosphere. They get down, they stay down for months at a time. So,
what kind of training did you have to go through to work on a submarine?
It's called a qualification program. It's like you're trying to qualify for Eagle Scout. So what we had to do is you had to go through the whole submarine. You had to go from compartment to compartment. You had to know where every pipe was, every valve was. You had to be able to help in a situation in that compartment, whoever was stationed there, and so you could step in and help. So that was your qualification. You had to know from stem to stern. You had to know everything that was in there, in generality. So, but after I got qualified, I specialized in. My job was auxiliaryman, which is my position was in control. We're servicing the air manifold for surfacing. And I was in charge of all airlines from 3,000 pounds down, and I was in charge of all hydraulics, air conditioning, refrigeration, and fresh water.
Did you have to receive any special training, or was that your basic training?
No, I had gone to submarine school, which taught you the whole experience, what you were going to encounter in a submarine, typical submarines, and then you went out on different submarines. I was in London, and it was always a school boat that was going out, so they would take you out in different evolutions. They do dive and surface all day long, so they rotate people on different parts of the submarine, so you get some experience.
Do you recall your instructors?
I remember one at sub school. I forget I remember him especially. He was pretty sharp, and I bumped into him out on the West Coast. And there was another fellow they had, and I forget what his name was. He was a character in one of the other courses I had taken. I had gone through management training and other little courses. I'd gone through A school at the Lakes, as a machinist mate, which is basically service and machinery. And from there, I was transferred to the West Coast.
How did you adapt to military life?
On a submarine? Mm-hmm. It's like home after a while. It's small. Sometimes when I go back home to Massachusetts, there's what they call Battleship Cove. They have a World War II battleship in Massachusetts. They also have a World War II submarine, the Lionfish, and I sometimes get down there and do a tour guides on it. So when you come home, you smell like diesel fuel. It permeates your clothes and your body. So I bumped into a fellow at in Washington, D.C. when we went out there for the Tea Party, and he happened to see my hat on, and his wife said her father was in submarine service. She said we didn't have to see him, we didn't have to hear him, we could smell him, because it does permeate your body. You don't realize it, but when you're down there, that's what's in the atmosphere. It's smell of diesel fuel and hydraulics. So when you're snorkeling on a diesel engine, when it shuts down, all those hydrocarbons have to be vented out, and they're usually in the boat. And your air is recirculated, goes through a filter, but it doesn't get out everything. It's not like a nuke. Although a nuke does have a diesel engine in it for emergency, for generating. If if the plant goes down, they can get it back up, or you can make minimum turns on it so it keeps a headway on it. But on a diesel boat, that's your only source of power. So your batteries run the engine charges the batteries, and the batteries, or you can run direct off through the electrical cubicle. The electricians monitor that, so they can do a combination of charging batteries and running the diesels for direct, electric. It goes to a generator, so you can power the electric motor directly from that.
Were you married or single when you were?
Single. Some guys go in, they get married kind of early, and it kind of, it's rough on the family, really, trying to, especially if you have any kids, and you're the low man on the totem pole. It's not easy being out at sea a lot. So some of them ended up getting divorced. Some of them ended up, just getting out as soon as they could. So they're retaining some of them.
What do you remember about the food?
The what?
The food and social.
We always had the best of food you're going to get in the Navy. And when you're in port, you could cook anything you want. Always plenty of steaks, whatever you wanted, as long as you cleaned up afterwards. That was it. But we had great food. When you're out at sea, they put 3 main meals down, but every 4 hours there's a watch change, so there's always another meal put out. Like it might be just a light meal, but you could eat every 4 hours. There's always something going on.
What was the social life like on a submarine?
Social life, you really didn't. You had work and sleep, and that was it. And you had your duty time, but if any equipment was down, you had to take and make sure that was fixed. That was a priority. Then after that, you get a little sleep, or if you want to play cards, or whatever. That was it. They had movie call every day, and if you weren't qualified, you didn't get to see a movie. And you had 2 movies on Sunday. So when we were out off of Vietnam. You didn't know what day of the week it was. You didn't know what day, whether it was nighttime or daytime. Just that when the Sunday came, you had 2 movie calls. And if it was nighttime, you went through control. It was rig for red, because we were always out there on photo recon. And if there was a white light that was moving, white light's an indication of you're at anchor. And an anchor light moving, it's a telltale sign. So the red light might come out of the scope, just to support running light. That's it. So they would never, suspected much of anything. But we were in waters that they would never send a nuke, and we were always susceptible if we get caught. That was the beginning of the end of us, maybe. So you never know.
Where did you serve during the war?
Served mostly in the West Coast, off of Vietnam, Yokosuka, Japan. We were in Osaka, Okinawa, and Hong Kong.
How long were you overseas for?
You go out to sea, you could be out there 1 month. You could be out for a week for just daily ops. You could be out for 5-6 months.
What was the longest time you were over there?
I think it was about 5 months, 5-6 months. You lose track of time.
Were you part of any specific operations?
What?
Were you a part of any specific operations?
We go out training with sometimes with naval air or other exercises.
What are some memories of going overseas?
Overseas, well, it was, when you hit the beach, you get the different clubs to go into. I remember in Hong Kong, go by the jewelry shop, all you saw was gold and green for the green emeralds. And we did some touring over there. We went up to they had like a cog railroad that went up to the top of a mountain, and you could look over that there. But a lot of guys end up in the bars over there or whatever. But I met a guy over there that I went to A school with, and he was on I think a tin can or something like that, but would be a destroyer. So we hadn't seen each other probably 6-7 months, but you bump into somebody you had gone to school prior to that, so you never know who you're going to run into.
How did you travel there overseas? Did you travel by submarine or was it by boat?
In a submarine. Sometimes if you were anchored out, they have what they call a liberty launch. It would take you from the boat to the pier. Most of the times we were tied up to a pier. We were small enough. But sometimes you'd have to be tied up to a tender. And if the tender was anchored out, you had to use a liberty launch to get in. Or you had to go over the sub-tender to get onto the pier. So sub-tender was like a floating machine shop. It had everything on there that needed to service that submarine. So,
how did you stay in contact with family back home?
by writing. And you mail on when you were on board ship. When you were overseas, you didn't need any postage. You just put free on it, and that was it. The government took care of it. But mail coming to you went to like Fleet Post Office. Like, when I was on the West Coast, it went to San Francisco, and then it was shipped out to different ports wherever the submarines or other ships were. So it probably took another week to get to you normally. So.
What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
When I was in San Diego, I used to I'd get downtown once in a while, but we had a bowling alley right on base there. You get hamburgers, cheeseburgers, fries, whatever you want, bowl. If you were old enough to drink, you'd get buy a beer. And they had a gym. You'd go over to the gym once in a while. Get downtown, go to the movies.
Did you get enough sleep when you were on the submarines?
Most of the time, yeah. But when there was something going on, I was up. So most of the time, I slept in my clothes. So I was up, ready to roll. You know, especially if they're going deep, I was up if there was a problem. So.
Where were you when the war ended?
That's back in the States, yeah.
What kind of friendships did you form while serving?
On board ship.
Mm-hmm.
You knew everybody on there. There might be 80 people, but you knew everybody. You knew what their temperaments were. There were some people that were, you know, kind of rough around the edges, and then there were some other people that, you know, it's just like anybody else, you know, but you're locked in with them. You got to live with these people, so you did what you had to do to live with them. When you're doing qualifications, you always brought coffee back.
Did you admire the people you served with?
Most of them, yes. Most of them were good. I had a great commanding officer. Matter of fact, when I got my dolphins, I was way ahead of my time as far as getting qualified. I did it what they call a super qual, that he took a pair of dolphins off his uniform and put them on mine. So dolphins are, you know, the medal that a submarine will wear with, you know, 2 dolphins with the bow of the submarine coming through. And then you have surface warfare would be for, you know, for surface people. You know, and there's a different qualifications. You get SEALs, and you know, and other people that, you know, with their different qualifications. That's their pin that they wear.
How'd you return home?
Flew. I did a lot of flying. Flew from the West Coast to the East Coast when I was in to A school down at the Great Lakes. I flew home first because I had some leave, and then went out to the West Coast. And then from there, went on a patrol. I was only there about a week, and they left for Westpac. We stopped in Hawaii for a bottom paint job and any valves that had to be serviced. So, and I was doing my quals, so I figured I'd see Hawaii when I come back. Didn't happen. We were coming back out. We weren't allowed to leave base, so I said, "But just hand me the water line, and that's it." No sense in even getting on the pier, because you always do this motion. Feels strange when you get off a ship that's always moving, and you're on land that doesn't move. So.
Did you ever witness any combat?
No, not out at sea. No.
Were you ever under any enemy? Were you ever under any enemy fire?
No.
Were you ever hurt while you were on a submarine?
Yeah, I probably, you know, get a black and blue fingernail once in a while, or a cut or something like that. But other than that, yeah, nothing serious. We had one fellow that was, when you come on board, you do what you call mess cooking. It's like KP with the here in the Army. And you have to basically set the tables, clean up, wash the dishes, help the cook. You know, we do the breakout for all the food that he wants. You have to find where all the stuff is stored. So, and there's storerooms, there's refrigerator, and deep freeze, and other places on board the ship where they kept things. So that was part of your qualifications. You had to spend like 3 months doing mess cooking, and at the same time you're doing your qualifications. So, and if you didn't do keep up on your quals when you're in port, you got no liberty. You stayed on board until you got caught up. So it was, you know, it was like, you know, if you want something, you got to give them something.
What are some of your most memorable experiences?
I think seeing the Orient, you know, Japan from on both sides. Went up to Kyoto in the Port of Kobe, which was really beautiful in there. So the different shrines and stuff like that. Hong Kong was pretty too. When you get out of the main drag of it, and there was some, you know, blighted areas there where the poor were lived, but you know, most of them spoke English or could speak English, because the British were there all the time, so they didn't like us because we treated them too good over there. The British never treated the Chinese that well. How
were you received by your family when you came home?
They were glad to see me.
What about your community?
I had moved a number of, the family had moved a number of times, so I really only knew, some people, nearby or something like that. But my parents had a variety store, so we lived up over it. So it was, you were married to that store. I used to help out. I never liked working the cash register. I'd do the run into the market, pick up vegetables, go to the meat market, pick up all the meat, and bring it back, and make deliveries once in a while. But that's the way it was. You come down the lawn, you walk through the store to get out the front door to go to school or work or wherever you were going. It was a sun up to sundown job for my parents.
How did you adjust to civilian life?
I didn't have any problems with that. But I stayed in the reserves for a number of years after I got out of the Navy, so I had a little piece of the cake at the same time. So, and I got a retirement at the end, so I stayed in until the Cold War was winding down and they were pushing people out. So at that point I had made chief, which was E7, and they said anybody with 26 years or more, it's E6, E7 and below, you have to get out. I had more time, that I could have stayed in, but they were pushing people out.
What have you done since leaving the military?
I worked in construction over the years, and I had a small business on my own before I retired.
Who are your best friends?
I have a friend of mine that I met in Scouts, helping the Scouts. And my son was a Scout, and he didn't have any children at the time, but then he adopted 2 sons, and both of them became Scouts, and he pushed both of them through the Eagle Scout program. Matter of fact, I helped the youngest one do his project for his community church. He had there was one of the schools that was putting on a big wing, and they were getting rid of the library that was in there and putting a great big library in. So he was able to get permission to take anything he wanted out of there. So I helped him build a new library for his church. And my only regret was I didn't even get a wood badge from you people. But I was in the Scouts for a number of years. I got a few, merit badges and stuff like that. And I had one great Scoutmaster. But, you only get one great person as a Scoutmaster. Sometimes you get other Scoutmasters that are filled in, but I had one guy that was just super.
How has your military experience impacted your feelings about war?
War is hell on earth, but it's sometimes necessary. I think it was President Andrew Jackson said that it's necessary to enrich our soil sometimes with the blood of our patriots and enemies. You're never going to get away from it. There's always somebody out there that's trying to subvert somebody. Like you say Hitler was bad as he was with concentration camps, but most people don't realize that Stalin was worse, and Mao Zedong was even worse than that. Hitler might have been responsible for 15 million people plus. Stalin, many more. In China, when they shut down, there was like estimated 70 million people disappeared from the face of the earth over there, what they call it, cleansing. My father had a brother that the last communication he had from him was in China. He was a merchant marine, never heard from him again. So you don't know. Plus eternity, right? You remember the priest that came there from East Russia that spoke? How many people were butchered? There were Christians and other people of religion, 46 million people. You never hear about that. What the Russians, what Stalin did to the Ukraine, starved them to death until they did what he wanted them to do. So, the Ukrainians have been under the Russian boot for a long time, so that's why those people do not, the language is similar, but, they've been under the Russian boot. It's not easy. And there's been war over there, but, they estimate about 9,000 people have died in that conflict. But, so what do? You gotta, if you don't speak up for them or help them a little bit, give them what they need. Although this country's got involved in Vietnam, we should probably just have been advisors and give them what they need for supplies instead of fighting the war for them. You lost almost 60,000 people, so, and how many people got messed up that are still, suffering from it today. Agent Orange is still an ongoing thing for people.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life?
I don't have a problem with the military or anything like that. Some things are necessary, and you just have to go along with it. If you're going to support your country, you support it all the way. Today we have an all-volunteer service. Most of the people are great. Most of them have got more education than people before them. When we had the draft, there was always a bad egg here and there. That's just like you find a police officer that does something stupid, he reflects upon the whole police departments across the country sometimes when it gets blown out of proportion. And the same in the military. And there's some people in there that do some stupid things. And you would think that they volunteered and worked their way up to where they are. They wouldn't do some of the things that they do. But it's life, really.
What effect did serving in the military have on your faith or spirituality?
We were out at sea. We always had a church service, even though we didn't have a priest or a minister. Every faith, if they wanted a service on Sunday, would have their service. So somebody would step up and have a reading or a singing. We had one fellow that went to every different religious thing they had. As long as they had singing, he liked to sing. So, but that's the way it was. Sometimes, if I was in port, I'd go to a church down the street. Over the years, I kind of slipped away. So, and we finally come back about 5 or 6 years ago. I had a hard time getting my wife to come back, but we finally tried Queen of Peace. We went to other churches, but we come back here. We like the 8:45, the children's mass. So. And I get joined the nights, and I also help out. I've done some volunteer work down at the Brothers Keeper, the furniture store. And I was a volunteer for the Strawberry Festival with the Knights of Columbus. So I was over at my favorite part, the old cars, helping them park. Matter of fact, they had a 50-50 raffle there, and they had other raffles. When they had a 50-50 raffle, you had to be there at 2:30 for the call. And they called this number 5, 6, 7 times, and no one showed up. And they drew another number, and I was standing right behind a guy, and I get $560. So when I was in church Sunday, I gave Father Pat a $50 bill. He says, "What's that for?" I said, "Your 10% commission, Father." Well, before that, a few years before that, you'd have the raffle for the carnival. I hit it for $1,000. And I gave Father Pat half back, and I spent the other part, most of it, over at the soup kitchen. I put a rack over there for the plates and stuff like that, trays, because everything was stacked, and you always want the one that's on the bottom. So I did one that was vertical, and then I built a rack for one side of the refrigerator for all the casseroles. It'll hold 45 casseroles. So.
Would you want your son or daughter to enter the military?
My son was talking about it, but he never went in the service. My youngest grandson is in the Marine Corps. Right now he's in the Marine Reserve, so his time's, when he gets through, he's not going to join up again, but he's trying to get on a police force right now.
Have you remained in contact or reunited with any fellow veterans?
Well, the buddy I met in the Scouts, he's an Army veteran, so we're very good friends. And I grew up with a fellow in this one community I lived in with it. My parents had the variety store, and I'm still friends with him. He lives in Pensacola. He's Navy retired, so he was a dental tech.
Are you a member of any veteran organizations?
I belong to the American Legion, VFW, AMFETS, Fleet Reserve, and I'm United States Submarine Veteran, so base commander this year. So,
what are some life lessons you learned in the military?
I think patriotism, and I think this, the community here is really instills a lot of patriotism in the kids when they're coming up through school, because we've gone into Veterans in the Classroom, and I'm over here at Veterans Memorial Park periodically for different events that are going on. So.
What lessons would you pass on to today's generation?
Patriotism. Serve your country. Did you see the movie for Hacksaw Ridge?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that interesting?
It was a great movie.
It was. He was a conscientious objector, but he wanted to serve, and he did serve, and he became the Congressional Medal of Honor recipient.
Is there anything I forgot to ask you about your military experience?
Well, I served. When I was in the reserves, I went quite a few different places. I went to Italy one time. I was in South Carolina weapons station, minesweeper station, doing decommissioning ships and stripping parts out of them for other ships. Most of my time was in New London, either at sub base or at the submarine tender. So I worked on nukes, but never went to sea on them. Went on diesel boats. So, and when I was transferred back to Boston, I was on a reserve training submarine over there, which was mostly for training. But do volunteer work, volunteer tour guide on the Lionfish down in Massachusetts.
What years were you in?
So the 65 to 68 on the West Coast, and then probably 5 or 6 years on the submarine in Boston. And then I was in the reserves. I was down at sub base most of the time, and they moved me from one place to the other, either sub base or the submarine tender, whatever they needed me at.
Well, I think that's all.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay.